Welcome to the Voice of MPE, the official podcast of Merchant Payments Ecosystem, Europe's largest merchant payments conference. This podcast brings you interviews with payment industry leaders and professionals from the entire payment world. For more information, head over to www.merchantpaymentsecosystem.com. In this episode, Claire Maslen, moderator of this session, will continue discussing with Birgit Kaiser from Unser and Melanie Ockerse from Intersect the topic of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. We will talk about how to create a healthy work environment that caters to the needs of all employees, regardless of their gender or any other factors.
So welcome back. This is the second part of our diversity and inclusion discussion here at MPE. We've building the program out. We've had a fireside chat. We've had some round tables, and obviously there is this podcast platform. My name is Claire Maslen, and I'm joined once again by Birgit, Andrea, and Melanie. So actually we spoke this morning about calling out bad behaviours and not allowing people around us to make comments that could be perceived incorrectly. Examples of any of you, do you feel comfortable doing that? Have you got examples of calling out both men and women actually for doing things that could make others uncomfortable from this inclusion perspective?
Well, I've got an example where I got a bit of a sexist comment, and I would have expected my male colleague to step in, someone who observed it. So we had a conversation. It was like an evening thing. I was wearing a dress and I was talking to that business partner. Let's call him business partner. And he said, "Oh, in the next meeting, if you wear the same dress but loosen it a little bit, you will be more successful." And I was shocked and horrified. But it's only like 2 years ago. So I was already like comfortable enough with myself to tell him this is not okay, and I'm not accepting that kind of comments. And so then we moved on. But what really shocked me is that my colleague was just standing there, not saying anything. So after that, I picked up the conversation. I picked it up with him again and said, "Why didn't you say anything?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know." I was like, "Okay, you have a daughter, right? Imagine someone speaks to your daughter like that." And then he's like, "You're so right."
Yeah. So that's a blatant sexism thing, isn't it? Comments along those lines. I had an example where I was in a forum in London a few years ago, and quite a well-known, renowned lady in fintech was hosting a session. And there was a young lady in the room. And when the introductions were being done, the young lady, very, very early on in her career, gave her introduction, and the chair lady said, "Speak up, dear, we can't hear you." Now, that young lady left the room feeling really uncomfortable. A spotlight had been shone on her in such a way that, she could go to future events and actually never say anything. So after that, I went and spoke to the chairperson or chair lady and said, "Look, that's not appropriate." And that to me is one of the examples about the inclusivity. So we've spoken a lot about diversity bit, but the inclusivity and allowing people to be, themselves and feel safe and feel that they can speak. And, we don't all have booming voices and huge presence, but we should all be welcomed in whatever form we are.
Yeah, and I believe this is also one of key task of a company, but also of an individual manager for his team or his environment to create such an atmosphere, right? Where the individual team member does not need to hesitate or consider, should I say something if I see something that goes wrong, right? So obviously it depends. I mean, if you are a manager, it's easier to speak up, right? But if you're in the team and you don't have these capacities, or it doesn't fit your personality, or you might feel threatened afterwards, you will not do it. So I think that's something that is very important for me as well in my role, to create such an open environment.
And that's why I think network is important, because when you don't have support in your company, you can find the support within the ecosystem with women and male who share the same values. I think that it is important.
Yeah, definitely. So we've sort of mentioned it a little bit around the policy side of things, and how far do you think we've come in terms of organisations having policy to support inclusive, diverse workforces? Or have we not come far enough with that yet?
I think it depends on how you define inclusivity and diversity. And also on the context of your company. So my company is originally a South African company. So you have to, it's a state policy that you have to have a quota of a certain amount of Black people, but it quickly gets like a tick box exercise. Also with like the quotas that we discussed, but there's a great example, and it's Ernst & Young, I believe, if I remember correctly. They actually introduced centers of excellence for neurodiversity. And that's not necessarily a policy or a quota. They just realized that there's so many different ways of thinking and like speaking. You know, that lady that you mentioned earlier, she has a different way of expressing herself, and you can't just tell everyone to speak louder. Or go and throw yourself into networking and lean in more. You know, we women always hear lean in more. Like, no, maybe it's just, maybe we don't need to be fixed all the time. And other people also don't need to be fixed all the time. If you're neurodiverse, and also that's a broad topic, you bring specific skills. And then the question is, how can a company adapt you so you can be the best person for the role if you have the potential? And that can be anything from how big is the office, what's your preference for communicating, someone who needs a lot of like alone time, maybe they want to be more at home rather than in a big office. It's very, very individual. And EY they have a very good example of that, and they're making a business case out of that because they know that brings them even more talent, but they have to adapt some of the ways they're doing things.
Okay. According to a study realized by AWPN and Banking Circle, we see that diversity is already integrated in the payments and financial services area as a real asset in terms of innovation, creativity. But I think that we have to do more actions in the field of education, because we see in many European countries, for instance, in France, real difficulties to promote the place of women in the field of science, tech, digital area. There is a challenge in this field. And the other key issue, I think, is also the psychological bias, because many women are very professional, very talented, but they don't have confidence, they don't have trust, and they hesitate to be more visible in the market. It is a real challenge, I think.
And it was interesting because this morning, one of our attendees mentioned the fact that actually the numbers entering into STEM or coming through STEM and entering the industry for women in particular is going down, not up. So we've had a period of, 10 to 15 years where there's been lots of activity, big push, and that paid dividends. But we're also seeing now women later in their careers leaving the industry. Why is that? I'd love to explore that as a topic. And then the bottom funnel coming through isn't happening. So something needs to happen. Do you have a view on why perhaps we're seeing women leaving the industry later on in their careers?
Maybe let me just first come back to your question on policies, because me with a legal governance background, obviously policies, guidelines, rules are very important. And I can see that all companies basically have really developed a lot in terms of policies, guidelines, rule books, whatever, based on regulatory frameworks, but also investor requirements. But what I think is key and makes the only difference is that these policies are also reflected in the values of the company and are also lived by the management top down, right? Because otherwise it's, as you mentioned, a paperwork exercise, tick box check, and not more. So I think that definitely makes the difference. And coming back to your question, why, in my view, women are leaving payments in a certain stage of their career? I'm not sure if payments is very different in that perspective than other industries. For me, I think, as a matter of fact, at a certain stage of the career, coming back again to motherhood, women are having a break in their career, right? And if due to setting up family, if they're then coming back and they don't find the right environment where they can easily combine and also see the values that they require to combine this in the company, I think they decide at one point of time to leave. But I personally would not see this very different from other industries.
No, I agree. I think it is, it's a generational thing rather than a sector specific thing. I wonder if there are people who are just done with it. They're just fed up of fighting to try and secure a place, to feel supported, and actually they just get to a point where they're almost intolerant of it and just...
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. We've talked about the glass ceiling for a long time. And now what I hear more and more coming up as a term is the glass cliff, where you're on the top, but you're standing on very thin glass or very thin ice, because again, and the more you go up, even if you've got equality or more diversity at the bottom, the more you go up, the more it's skewed again towards the males. And then you have that kind of unhealthy environment again, that understandably a lot of women might at some point just get tired, or the glass cliff is suggesting that it happens quite a lot that women are being promoted in very senior roles just to fail because the playing field is not set up for them.
Yeah. So one area that I wanted to explore before we kind of wrap up is around equity. And not, obviously, we focus a lot on equality and we've spoken about diversity, but equity and bringing people along who perhaps have come from different backgrounds, haven't come through traditional routes, traditional education, may have come from more vulnerable areas. I believe that we need to take action to give people opportunity from those walks of life, different backgrounds. Do you think we are programmed to just automatically go for university graduates? We talk about STEM, we talk about role modelling, but some people don't have role models at home. How can we make sure that we're bringing in a breadth of talent from all different walks of life?
It is important, I think, to integrate diversity in the recruitment process, and within the companies to create a real knowledge program with workshops, with networking sessions, clubs, to help these people to integrate the codes and the information linked with the market.
And there's another idea that everyone could kind of research for themselves. And it doesn't, if you want to do something for yourself, right, you don't have to wait maybe for your company to offer something. And maybe you can also look outside of your industry just to make an impact and start somewhere. There are, and I believe in every country, you get these amazing mentoring programs where someone from a, let's say, more educational background is matched with someone who's from a completely different background, and you can give a little bit back in a role as a mentor and expose people to role models that otherwise they might not have access to.
So grassroots kind of projects through communities, as well as thinking about, recruitment fairs at universities. Actually, we should be broadening or widening the net.
And even starting earlier, right? Not on university level, but beforehand in schools, right? There are these, workshop weeks, right? Where companies can introduce themselves. I think that could also, serve as one aspect to broaden the openness of a different approach.
Okay. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you to MPE again for raising this and allowing us to use this as a platform. And let's hope that next year it's an even bigger conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the official MPE podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the show and check other video interviews with other industry leaders on our YouTube channel. For more content, follow Merchant Payments Ecosystem on LinkedIn and Twitter. Don't miss out on our Positivity magazine, and remember to subscribe to the MPE newsletter at www.merchantpaymentsecosystem.com.